Hi, good evening. Welcome to the 6th edition of Multipolis Mumbai. Our conversation this evening is on environment and our city, brought to you by Avid Learning in association with Studio-X and TimeOut India. I would like to start this evening's program with a short introduction to Avid. Avid, as you briefly saw, is an SR initiative fostering creative learning across literature, culture, heritage, and art, including visual, performing, and applied arts, through short-term courses, workshops, and discussion forums. Avid aspires to engage all those who like to celebrate the living with the arts. Today's program, Multipolis Mumbai, is a series focused on discussing the past, present, and future of fundamental aspects of our lovable Mumbai, whether it be our creative industries, innovative thinking, or critical matters, as in today's topic, environment. The speakers for the evening are Mr. Debbie Goenka, Pranab Kishore Das, and Rishi Agarwal, with dialogue moderated by Naresh Fernandez. I would also like to take this moment to thank all of you for being here and also express our gratitude to our speakers and to all our partners for putting together this session on Multipolis Mumbai. Also wishing Time Out India our heartiest congratulations on their 8th anniversary. Displayed outside is a glimpse of Time Out's tribute to Mumbai. Finally, before I hand this evening to Naresh, I would also like to let you all know that our next session on Multipolis Mumbai is on literature on 10th of October, right here at Studio-X. Without further ado, let's commence this thought-provoking session. And once again, a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you.
Yes, now it is. Good evening and welcome to the 6th edition of Multipolis Mumbai. Today, as you know, we're going to talk about the environment, which can be a fairly heavy thing. So I thought we'd start off light, and I'm going to show you the trailer of a Bollywood film. I'm not sure how many of you all actually saw Tum Mile, But it's a pretty horrific film, as you can see. But I'm sure many of you have vivid memories of that awful afternoon of July the 26th, 2005, that inspired that film. As you recall, 39 inches of rain lashed down on the city in a 24-hour period, causing floods that left 550 people dead in our city. Millions of people were stranded as the public transport system shut down. The floods left the city so traumatized, they left a mark on popular culture, not just in this film, but also in this one, with some canny branding, 26 July at Barista. And it has a tagline that says it's a tribute to the spirit of Bombay and to world humanity, no less. The most intriguing artifact I've found about that day is this extended Bhojpuri music video called Musibat Mein Mumbai, which provides a migrant's perspective on the collapse of a dream city. The jacket depicts many scenes we remember from that day, people wading through dangerously high water, and also scenes that are very resonant with the North Indian migrants who are the audience for this video, such as on the left-hand side, bloated buffaloes in a stable. Many stables, as we know, are operated by people from that part of the country. The floods had several causes. Among them was the antiquated drainage system that was clogged with plastic bags that we Mumbaikars tend to throw everywhere. But it wasn't just bad drains that caused the floods of 2005. It was also badly planned construction across the city. The development of the Bandra Kurla complex has clogged one part of the Mithi River, which carries rainwater to the sea, as you know. And then the extension of a runway at the airport has clogged another section. In the week after the flood, text messages flew around madly as Mumbaikars urged each other not to litter and to be much more careful about the way we treat the environment. 7 years later, we're back to our old ways, as was obvious from the waterlogging that inundated us at rush hour just 3 days ago. Of course, urbanization involves a battle with nature, as buildings and infrastructure take over fields and forests. The question we need to ask is how far we can push our city and where we need to draw the line. To shed light on that, as always, we have a sparkling panel. When I was 11 years old, I took my first nature trip to Matheran, an expedition that was organized by the World Wildlife Fund. The leader of that trip was Devi Goenka, who doesn't recognize me now because I've got fat and bald. And he's been working in the field of environmental protection since 1975. He's been involved in several debates about conservation in Bombay, notably around the Borivali National Park. He was successful in protecting over 3,500 square kilometers of forests in Vidarbha, making sure that they weren't denotified. He has also been involved in campaigns to prevent the denotification of the Melghat Tiger Sanctuary, the notification of Dahanu Taluka as an ecologically sensitive area, and the protection of the coastal areas of Murud and Janjira, in addition to several other campaigns. I've known P.K. Das for at least 20 years, but it wasn't until the folks at Avid put up the slide today and sent me his biodata that I realized that his first name was Pranab. PK is an architect and a planner who's responsible for the excellent promenades at Bandra. He's framed a similarly ambitious project for Juhu. He recently organized an enormous exhibition at the NGMA showcasing plans to conserve the city's open spaces. He's also actively involved in organizing slum dwellers and evolving models of affordable housing. Rishi Agarwal is a research fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. I met him today for the first time. But I've been reading about him for years and the many projects he's been involved in. Just a few weeks ago, he announced something that's very dear to my heart, the Walking Project. I'm one of those crazy old men who's always yelling at cars who are badly parked or motorcyclists who are coming down the pavement, so I really hope that this succeeds. Among other things, he's been the Chief Operations Officer at Carpool, India's first organized carpooling service. He's a founding member of the Mumbai Environmental Social Network. He's been actively involved in stimulating debate and advocacy on a bus rapid transport system for Bombay. Many of us know him as an outspoken civic activist. He's been involved in campaigns on governance and improving the quality of life in Mumbai, among which is protecting the coastal mangrove forests in our city. He's a strong believer that we should all get involved in the political system. And as proof of that, he decided to contest the parliamentary elections in 2009. So let's start with Debi.
Thanks, Naresh. I've been asked to speak for about 10 minutes, I think. And I'm not going to be able to say very much in 10 minutes. So I'll talk about two of our campaigns, which is the Sanjay Gandhi National Park at Borivali, and also the campaign to protect mangroves, which started off as a Mumbai thing and has spread to Maharashtra, and in fact now all over India as well. The slide is lifted from the recent MMRDA study of open spaces in Mumbai. And the light green patches actually represent the mangroves around the coast of Mumbai city, most of them at least. There are patches that don't seem to appear there. And the green and blue on the top right-hand side is actually the national park. And Tulsi Lake, Tulsi Lake on the north, Vihar Lake in the middle, and Powai Lake on the south of the national park are the three lakes that we are talking about. So I've spent, well, about 25 years of my life trying to save the national park from all kinds of things and all kinds of people and all kinds of activities. And a slightly longer time trying to get mangroves put on the national map and to get to some kind of protection and whatever. Let me start off with mangroves. The story actually begins sometime in September 1983. And we were on a site visit to Raigad district, where Maharashtra government wanted to set up various shore-based industries along the coastline of Raigad district. And the collector took a team of industrialists and people from MIDC and two environmentalists, including me, to the Revas Mandwa jetty and pointed out to a luxuriant growth of 200 to 300 acres of mangroves and told the industrial guys, you know, this is 300 acres of wasteland. We can clear it and give it to you within 6 months. And I think in front of everybody else, I interrupted him and gave him a lecture on the importance of mangroves and the ecological significance. And I don't think he's ever forgiven me for that. But that actually triggered off in me the realization that nobody in government knew what the mangroves were all about, what their importance was, and why they should be protected. So sometime in 87, 88, we got the Maharashtra government to notify them as scheduled species under the Maharashtra Preservation of Trees Act. So for the first time, they got some legal protection in Maharashtra state. And when we were working on the coastal regulation zone notification, and for the benefit of listeners, let me tell you that the CRZ notification is a notification issued by the Environment Ministry under the Environment Protection Act, which protects the entire coastline of India, a 500-meter strip along the entire coastline of India. And we made sure that mangroves came in the CRZ1 category, which is the ecologically sensitive category. And the notification as it was drafted then protected all mangroves in the country, plus a 500-meter buffer zone around the mangroves, which of course the ministry subsequently removed from the notification. In 2004, when we realized that the CRZ notification wasn't really working in protecting the mangroves, because all kinds of people were happily violating the CRZ notification. There were mangrove plots allotted to forest officers, to MLAs, and in fact there's a housing colony at Warsaw which had mangroves given to the judges of the Bombay High Court. So we were actually fighting a battle against almost everybody who were trying to grab hold, and take over mangroves. And unfortunately or fortunately, our present Chief Justice of India is also a member of that particular society. So that's the kind of pressures one is facing when one is trying to protect mangroves. The Ministry of Environment, which was the parent ministry that issued the CRZ notification in 91, amended it about 25 times over 20 years, and every amendment was to weaken and dilute the CRZ notification. And in 2011, we got a new CRZ notification. At least Jairam Ramesh calls it a new CRZ notification. But in my mind, it is the 26th amendment of the CRZ, and it has further diluted already weak notification. The Environment Ministry at that time had set up a committee under the chairmanship of Dr. M.S. Swaminathan. And from our reading of the situation, the Swaminathan Commission had been tasked with further diluting the CRZ notification. Unfortunately, during the term of the first Swaminathan Committee, the tsunami hit India. And the thousands of people who died, particularly along the east coast of India, I think gave the ministry and the Swaminathan Committee considerable thought. And in fact, I think changed the complete approach of the Swaminathan Committee. So from trying to dilute the notification, the Swaminathan Committee actually tried to recommend the strengthening of the CRZ notification. But that unfortunately never really happened. The Bombay High Court, whom we had approached in September 2004 for protecting the mangroves, gave us a landmark order in October 2005, whereby all mangroves in Maharashtra state are protected by now, over and above the CRZ notification, the High Court order. And basically they said all government land which had mangroves on it should be notified as protected forests and physically handed over to the Forest Department for protection. And all privately owned land which was not government owned would have the word forest entered in the revenue record so that no non-forestry activity could be carried out on privately owned mangrove land. As a result of this order, we got about 54 square kilometers of mangrove forest notified as protected forests, including the ones that you see, most of them. And they've been handed over to the Forest Department. Other areas in Navi Mumbai and Thane district are also part of this notification. But the Maharashtra government has consciously delayed notifying the rest of the mangroves in Ratnagiri and Sindhudurg districts. Also some mangroves in Raigad have been left out. And realizing that the government was not pushing it, we went back to the High Court in December 2009. In January 2010, the High Court passed a second order saying that until the notifications are finally issued for the whole state, no non-forestry activity can be carried out on any mangrove land in Maharashtra state. So that order still stands. And we find that today the biggest problem is government agencies actually. The BMC itself, the MMRDA, MSRDC, all these guys are people who want mangroves for their projects, and they are the guys who are actually hell-bent on destroying whatever little is left. I'll switch over to SGNP. I don't know how much time I have left, but yeah, about 3 minutes, so I'll try and finish off the... We filed this petition in 95, and at that point of time, there were about 33,000 illegal structures inside the national park. There were several quarries operating around the periphery of the park and also partially inside the park. There were all kinds of illegal activities happening inside a notified national park. And there was also a state government factory operating inside Sanjay Gandhi National Park, which occupied about 60 acres of land. In May 97, we got an order from the High Court saying that the quarries, all the illegal commercial activities had to be stopped. The government factory also had to be removed. And a rehabilitation scheme had to be framed for the encroachers inside the Sanjay Gandhi National Park, who were there before 1st January 95, which was the cutoff date for regularization of encroachments as per the Maharashtra government policy. The Forest Department opposed our petition at that point of time, and they said there's no need for court intervention, and that the government is seized of the problem, and they will take all steps to stop all the illegal activities and remove the encroachers and rehabilitate the eligible encroachments as per government policy. And as we expected, nothing happened. In January 97, we went back to the High Court and said the government has done nothing in the past 1.5 years since you all passed the order. And in fact, the number of encroachments had increased from 33,000 to 61,000 because of the intervening elections that took place in Maharashtra at that point of time. So finally, in May 97, we got an order from the High Court saying that all this had to be stopped. Now from May 97 to 2012, as I mentioned earlier, the quarries have been stopped. The government factory has been also demolished and the land handed back to the Forest Department. About 50,000 structures have been demolished by the Forest Department. And almost 10,000 families have been rehabilitated as per the rehabilitation scheme framed by the Maharashtra government and approved by the High Court at Chandivali in Mumbai. There's still about 15 to 20,000 families still left in the park. We still have man-animal conflicts with leopards moving out of the park, and unfortunately, the main unintended target of these leopards seem to be young children or women who are squatting in bushes in the dark because of lack of sanitary facilities, and often get mistaken by leopards as dogs or wild boar or whatever, and killed. So I think it's really in the interest of the city and everybody else also that this court order is complied with as fast as possible. The boundary wall that is required to be built along the sensitive areas as per the High Court order also needs to be completed. And this can only be done after the families living inside the park are moved out. Now, unfortunately, there is no political will today to remove these people. The second phase of the rehabilitation scheme is progressing very, very slowly. And in fact, as far as the first part of the rehabilitation is concerned, a lot of people have actually sold out the tenements and moved out. So the whole question is whether these SRA schemes actually work for the benefit of the people who are intended to be rehabilitated. I will end by saying that, as I said, we spent more than 20 years fighting these two campaigns. And we need the support of the citizens of the city and the country and the world if these kind of things are to be protected. Given the land value in Mumbai city, the amount of area that has been taken away from the builders and the politicians and the bureaucrats as well, I don't think that figure would fit into a calculator, even in dollars. I think if you start, multiplying 103 square kilometers of Borivali and 40 kilometers of mangroves by the current value per acre, I think that figure would be mind-boggling. So we are fighting very, very powerful lobbies. We are fighting people who have all kinds of designs on these open spaces. And we need the active support and participation of people to help continue to protect these kind of spaces. Thank you.
Thanks so much. This segues nicely into PK's segment. PK has been involved in building the housing projects that people from the Borivali National Park have been moved to. So PK, if you could tell us about that, please, but also about the other work you've been doing.
Thank you, Naresh. I won't start with the national park. I'll start with something else. Well, I think the topic, if I just get back to the topic that you've set out for this evening's discussion, which is really environment and our city, it just brings in another dimension to the debate or the discussions about environment. And that is the city. And you've said our city, so which is what I'm referring to or meaning. It's Mumbai, essentially, to begin with in our discussions. Though most of the issues that we can discuss could be generic, but we look at environment and our city. And it is this city, the dimension that then is brought onto the subject, really makes it much more challenging and makes it much more difficult in the battle for conserving sensitive environmental and ecological assets of the city. So let me begin by saying that though both the environment and the city ought to be synonymous with each other in a sense that they coexist, that there must be a harmony, there must be a plan to see that one is not posed against the other necessarily, but how cities could be built with completely honoring and respecting and accepting and recognizing the geography of the land, which includes the environment. Sadly, it has not been so. And that's where the most difficult situation really comes into being. There are sharp contradictions between opposing groups about the two subjects that we're talking about, the environment and cities. And most of them are evident, these contradictions are mostly evident in the development of our towns and cities and the kinds of policies that we pursue or the kind of processes that we kind of adopt in building and developing our towns and cities or human settlements, if broadly said. And the same contradiction is also observed in the popular imaginations of built environment, which brings in a whole set of professionals as well into the net and their imaginations about what built environments are. And some of these contradictions are very sharply reflected in their and those imaginations about built environment. So that's the kind of the background, I would say, with which we could hold our discussion. And that really makes it much more interesting. So there has been traditionally or historically this classical north-south divide between the so-called environmentalists and those who are promoting development in inverted commas. And therefore, this divide has in fact affected, I would say adversely, as I said earlier, our imaginations. And it has also led to skewed conditions and situations within which we have begun to operate. And setting out, therefore, and thereby skewed situations, demands to which we get answers and ways forward which are too skewed. So this whole situation needs to be understood as to how a kind of a false notion is sort of presented, it's packaged, and how with those kinds of false conditions, answers are sought, which obviously then are not the right answers in the long term and in longer interest and wider perspective of issues. Now, one of such examples is very typically the whole issue or the question of urbanization. I'm yet to come across any conference or a seminar that I have attended in the past couple of years, where the opening remarks are not, goes without saying that how more and more people are coming to cities and how urbanization is the way forward, and it is inevitable. But the sad thing there is the way urbanization is skewed and how urbanization is seemingly presented as being synonymous with city building, and how city building is synonymously hooked and linked to construction syndrome, mega construction syndromes. So the whole situation gets in this process, as you saw, how urbanization, which is essentially about liberation of people from the oppression of colonial conditions, of feudal structures, of caste, of gender discrimination, etc., to a real estate question. And that's where the real conflicts begin, because when it comes down to finally this notion or idea that cities are a ground for maximizing capital investments and turnovers and profits, it is found world over that real estate is the only instrument or means through which the generation of capital in the shortest period has been the highest. It's uniformly across the world. And so real estate's contradictions with environment, therefore, is most manifest and vivid. There is no other area where these conflicts have been seen to be at its highest, and no better example than Mumbai as a city in that sense of the contradictions between the real estate aggression and environmental conservation and protection efforts. So that's being the background, the Mumbai, the environment, and the city. I just move on to then what is our alternative? Let's very quickly talk about that in a line or two. I'm not going to present, or at this point I would hesitate with the time given here, to just raise a question rather and suggest a way forward. And what could be the method of the process in achieving that. And that, to my mind, is to pursue a democratic socio-environmental alternative. Now, it's a very heavily loaded sentence. Democratic socio-environmental alternative. Now, which means we bring in social aspects to deal with society, to deal with communities, to deal with, with the politics of people and their communities with environmental concerns, and how a more democratic structure towards both, in addressing both the issues in terms of whether you simply put it as a movement, a democratic movement towards a socio-environmental alternative, probably is a way forward, is probably a method that would give us new directions. For the directions are not specifically specified or drawn up as one or two or three rules of the game. So first now let me come down to Mumbai very quickly. And let's take a look at the vast and diverse extent of the natural and ecological assets of this city, seldom viewed and understood comprehensively. Now we have active organizations, communities, individuals who are relentlessly contributing invaluably to movements at various levels, at various issues, addressing various issues, but seldom comprehensively. Now, why that is also happening to my mind is because there is very rarely or seldom comprehensive data or information available to us. Information is manufactured deliberately, data is manufactured deliberately, and is decimated in bits and pieces. It's a design. So one of our first tasks in our democratic endeavor would have to be to collectively engage, and that's a democratic process of conducting surveys and database, is to conduct democratic surveys and to come up with comprehensive knowledge of what these environmental assets of the city are. Now, to just very quickly give you a glaring disparate figure. That map that Devi just showed of what MMRDA has published a few days back is such a fake figure. It's a bluff. It says Mumbai's island is 437 square kilometers. The BMC has conducted its surveys in this ongoing process of the revision of the development plan, which is, as you know, is under process. And BMC has come up with a figure of 457 square kilometers. And we at the Open Mumbai have carried out a survey a year back to establish with challenge, and this has been challenged to the BMC and as well as to the MMRDA, of an area of 482 square kilometers. Now, where does all these 20, 25, 30 square kilometers just disappear? We went to the root of it with the BMC commissioner just a week back, because we both happened to work on a project that was being presented to the chief minister. And the BMC commissioner said, look, I'm presenting 457, you are saying 482, let's try and reconcile these figures. And so our people sat with the development plan authorities, and we found that over 25 square kilometers of the wetlands of Mumbai are missing from the survey. And interestingly, in the land calculated for development, that means buildable land, or as officially they say tenable land, they add the 25 square kilometers of the wetlands, interpreting that that's buildable land. So on one hand, 25 square kilometers is deleted from the overall map of Mumbai, but added to the developable land. So just to cut it short, so data is extremely important. Data is nobody's monopoly. Data must be gathered. Community surveys must be initiated. There have to be collective endeavors at preparing the maps of our cities. And this is a democratic process. Just to give you an example of what I meant by a democratic social environmental endeavor. Let's move on to the way forward. With all this data, with all this information that we have, now just last week, Naresh, we just exchanged it on SMS. Just a couple of days back, Times of India, I think day before, brought out this news that an entire creek is missing from the development plan of Mumbai. Now, while the communities living in Oshiwara and I took around for to oppose certain projects that were being, built along the creeks, we just discovered, that's luckily because I had a document in my hand of this mapping that we did last year, of an entire creek which is missing. And with the creek disappears an entire range of mangrove forests of that area at Oshiwara, which was then clandestinely landfilled by the Sahara group, not less than 350 acres. 350 acres of mangrove, I think Devi has also been fighting on that issue, have been depleted by illegal landfilling, just because a legal document that we follow for development does not register the existence of the creek and the mangroves. Ironical, but anyway, that's about data. So what's the way forward? So the second point I'm making, therefore, maybe a couple of minutes more, I argue that the way forward for defining Mumbai's development plans, or for that matter, any city's development plans and proposals, are in the integration and networking of this vast eco-sensitive areas, rather than considering them as exclusive, barricaded, and inaccessible. Now, these are very, very heavy demands. There can be sharp differences with what I'm demanding or putting up as a way forward for checking this abuse. For checking this abuse, therefore, this integration is extremely important, not excluding it. For in the history of Mumbai's land and development history, we have realized that most of the crime in real estate, most of the destructions of natural assets have happened due to the exclusion of some of these areas from the mainstream plans and development areas of the city, as I gave you an example. B, that they can't just be protected by barricading them. That barricading is rather offensive, I say politically. So what are the other ways of protecting without barricading? Can communities come to watch them? Can neighborhood groups of people take charge of ensuring protection of these natural assets? Can movements of people and communities be our guard and security for environmental protection? These are larger questions that I leave on the platform of socio-environmental movements and justice. With that, I move on to say, we therefore at Open Mumbai, an exhibition that was inaugurated at the National Gallery of Modern Art, went on for 2 months, is now currently showing at the Nehru Center for next few months. I sincerely urge all of you to visit that exhibition only for one small limited reason. There could be other interests in you, and there's much more in that exhibition. But just to see comprehensively what the city of Mumbai really is and can mean with this very rare, vast, and extensive natural assets that we have, which no other city in this world possesses. Let me tell you, the diversity of it. It's the mangroves, it's the wetlands, it's the creeks, the rivers, the lakes, the ponds, the nalas. And you have this extensive diversity of environmental assets, and that, to tell you, constitutes 50% of the land area of Mumbai. If Mumbai area is 482, which has been established as surveyed by us, also by the municipal corporation being correct, with 1 or 2 square kilometers of variation, 239 square kilometers are the open spaces or the ecological assets of this city. We are struggling for 22 square kilometers of development for slums rehabilitation. We are struggling for 5 square kilometers of dilapidated cessed buildings reconstruction in the city. This constitutes 239 square kilometers. Shouldn't there be a plan for it? Shouldn't there be a people's plan for it? Shouldn't there be ideas about their conservation into a comprehensive plan that integrates with the development plan of the city, not made exclusive? So these are the larger questions with which I will leave. I will very quickly, it's a bit long, but maybe I'll run through few slides. Just to hint before you, just to suggest to you that how in physical planning terms, in development planning terms, how this integration can be achieved. This integration of the real estate aggression, or I would move away from that to say the social needs of the people who reside in this city, and the protection, conservation protection, and enrichment of this vast 239 square kilometers of the environmental assets. So we have a few hints. This all of you can see at a much greater length at the exhibition ongoing at the Nehru Center. Next. Yeah, this is, some of these books of the exhibition are also on sale here, if any of you interested. Wow, what's happened? Oh, it goes back, I'm sorry. Well, we, for example, this vast extent of natural assets, you can see the list here. Yeah, sorry. The seafronts, the beaches, the rivers, creeks, mangroves, wetlands, lakes, nallas, parks and gardens, of course, the historic forts and precincts, hills and forests, city forests like the Bahim Nature Park, and area networking. These are some of these elements that we identify could be the instruments of change, or could be the means for achievement of the objective that I talked about of integration. Next. Next. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Well, this is the map that I talked about that Open Mumbai has published. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, this is just a data about Mumbai's open spaces, which shows, I'm sorry, not 262 square kilometers are the open spaces. The seafronts, I'll just run through them. What the coastline of Bandra was, and what the coastline today is. Now, the tragedy in Mumbai has been, let me tell you, if you see the slide on the right-hand corner, all along our coastlines, all along the mangroves in this city, all along the wetlands of this city, we've experienced huge dumping of rubble and debris and garbage. So this is the picture. In fact, some of them don't have CTS numbers. In fact, they don't have. And in fact, there are instances, which also came out recently in the press, how false CTS numbers are then put on these lands, which are created by land dumpings, and how they're manipulated for further construction by developers. The recent one concerning Gundecha builders. And how those dumping grounds have today become the proud forecourt for the people of Bandra, a cultural forecourt for the people of Bandra, who now protect these areas and the sensitive, eco-sensitive areas here, which the sensitive borders, I would say. For example, the mangroves of Carter Road. These were little bushy plants when we started the project, and today they've grown to about 35, 40 feet tall after the project has been completed a few years back. And you can see the conditions on the left side. I'll just run through some of these slides very quickly. The beaches, and how these beaches are constantly facing erosion, and how beaches can be protected through nourishment and other methods without any civil construction, without any dumping of rocks, which are in fact detrimental to environmental cause. And so how we could do that, how the Juhu beach has been cleared of the encroachments, how public spaces have been expanded, and that beach, which like in Versova, was encroached into a very large area could be freed for public access and use. You have the rivers. Now, this is one of the biggest planning tragedies of the city. MMRDA, which is the sole planning agency for the government of Maharashtra, set up a real estate project at the Bandra Kurla, known as the BKC. And it makes all the money that it can for the state government by auctioning land in this area. But when one of the most eminent architects of this country did the master plan of BKC, along with the planners of the state government and the different authorities, they didn't notice that the BKC was adjoining a river in this city, one of the 4 rivers. Mithi River came to be known to public only after the floods of 86, is that right? 82. 2005, I'm saying. 2005 floods. And then we learned that there was something called a Mithi River. Otherwise, it was a drain. And BKC ignored this. If they only developed the edges of the waterfronts, it could have added, even in real estate terms, value to the property. Leave that apart. So this is what happens, and how we have suggested how some of these creek edges which have been abused, vandalized, can be conserved and integrated onto the, you can see the kind of debris along the Mithi River. The kind of, this is the kind of pictures and the rich environmental conditions that we have. So I'll quickly run through, I'll wind up there actually, because we can go on with some of these issues and elements. And I'd like to conclude by saying that let's really discuss together how environmental concerns and city building ideas can operate simultaneously, seamlessly, with a coherent and intrinsic relationship. A new relationship in which the present attempts by both the protagonists for establishing exclusive areas of development and environment are challenged. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Peter. If you haven't seen the Open Mumbai exhibition, I really urge you to go and look at it. It's got lots of big ideas, like he said. But on the top floor, there's an astonishingly detailed map of Bombay. And I just love that because it gives me childlike glee. You can identify your house there. So that's the other reason to go and see it. Rishi.
Thanks. I would like to have it slightly interactive if Naresh would permit, and have some feedback from folks out here. And this is actually how I want to start my slide. Ever since I received the invitation, I've been just going kind of mad over this positioning of the words. City, in the environment and our city. And I've been doing various permutation combinations. I'm saying, could that have been the city and our environment? Would that have been better? Environment and the city, then it would have sounded too similar to Sex and the City. So that's the way I've been doing multiple combinations. And over again, I came back to the city and our environment. And what is this word R? I mean, I've been into environmental activism for more than a decade now, almost 15 years. That's the only subject I've known since I was a kid. Grew up on Debi and the exploits of BAG and a lot of those things, and the same experiences as WWF. And the premise, ultimately, I mean, that I'm coming to is that this whole subject of environment, that sense of R, is only with a limited number of people in Mumbai. I mean, you look at, I mean, there might be researchers over here, and with Google nowadays, nobody needs to be a researcher, and you can go back and Google for the past 10 years on any issue, and you'll have the same set of names either commenting or showing some kind of activity. I'll just stop there for a while, and this is where I would like to have some participation. I want to know from the audience, how many of you are a member of any environmental organization or have ever, I mean, just, okay, we can start with that. Anybody is a part of an environmental organization? If you can just raise your hand high enough so we can have 5, 6 people. Very few. How many of you have ever volunteered with any kind of environmental cause? Okay. So, yeah, we have a couple of hands going up. Anybody would like to just, 2 people kind of say what kind of volunteering they have done? Anybody who's most excited about their experience? Yeah, sure. Yeah.
See, my name is Kim Singh.
Okay.
I do a lot of activism. One is volunteering,
Right.
picking up debris from the beaches. But more importantly, trying to to influence policy.
Okay.
Okay, and getting corporations involved also.
Okay.
Because, as you were talking about BKC,
Right.
okay, some of the companies...
In short, yeah.
So, getting companies and using their might
Right.
to influence policy.
On environment. Yeah, okay. Just one more. Anybody else? An example of volunteering. It could be very small. I mean, just one-off. You might have done just one beach cleanup also, not on a sustained basis. Anybody? Okay, yeah, please.
I'm a student from HR college. We have done many programs related to. We have tied up with Times of India for beach cleanup drive.
Right.
With green carbon for saving tiger conservation and all. These programs we have done a lot. And this time also we have tied up with green carbon only for tiger.
Right.
And again with Times of India. And we are even looking for some sponsors and all.
Got an idea. So great. Thanks for contributing to the discussion. But I mean, this is where I'm driving the point. This is an audience which has come to a program in a very, very busy city where people don't have time. So I necessarily draw the conclusion that this is an audience which is more concerned about the environment. I mean, the people who are out there, I don't know how many people the mailing list went out to, maybe 10,000, 20,000 people in various other medium. And out of that, I think it must be 100 people, less than 100 actually over here in the room. And out of that 100, we are having 5 or 6 people who are members of any environmental organization, and about 10, 12 people who volunteered, of which 2 people have shared their experiences, kind of felt passionate enough. And this really is the dilemma. I mean, sitting in 2012, in fact, for the past 5 years, this is what I've been speaking to a lot of my peer group and also to the media, that this is something I used to say in 2010, 2 years back, that you could almost write an obituary for the environmental movement in Mumbai. There is no environmental movement. It's a few completely mad people who are carrying the cross on their shoulders, waiting that somebody will come to take over the baton. And a few people do come. I'm not saying that there has been absolutely no development. But, I mean, I grew up during my teens, during the 90s and college years, and I felt that the environmental discourse was far more richer. Of course, the topic today has been limited to, I think, mangroves and open spaces, and that's why you see a lot of real estate talk and a lot of square kilometers and square meters. But if you look at overall also, the quality and quantity of the environmental discourse has actually gone down in the city. And this brings me to the thing about R. Who is this R? Do people in Mumbai really feel about the environment? How many people are members of environmental organizations? Very poor. How many people go out to volunteer for environmental causes? Again, very poor. And that sense of R is more towards our lifestyle. It's essentially our lifestyle. This is our perfume, this is our SUV, this is our lounge bar, this is our hangout, this is our vacation. In that sense, the city is actually a means of consumption. The city is, the whole overall sense is not of being a caretaker or of a guardian to the city. The city is meant for exploitation and consumption. And that sense of R is kind of very limited. Totally missing. It's totally missing. And in that context, it's impossible, to have a good environment. So if the other conclusion which I completely come to, and which I would slightly disagree with, in some places with the fellow panelists, the enemies of environment, in that sense, is said to be development. It is said to be corrupt politicians. It's said to be corrupt IAS officers and business interests, vested interests. My experience with activism has been, and a lot of people feel it's a very uphill task, etc., is huge amount of success. In places where I have intervened alone, in places where I have intervened with just 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 people, we've said mangrove pockets, the 350 acres which PK was speaking about. I carried out the campaign in 2002. Unfortunately, I have differences with Debi on that, but we will not speak about differences right now. We'll put up a unified environmental front that all environmentalists are on the same page and agree on every issue. But I know the kind of tough fight we carried out over a period of 6 to 8 months in the absence of RTI, in the absence of internet, in the absence of smartphones and email on phone, in the absence of mobile phones itself. I didn't have a mobile phone then. And through so much of difficulty, we managed to stop dumping on that 500 acres, which means that success is possible. I just completely disagree with people who start the conversation with saying, how bloody difficult it is. How this is bad, how the BMC is bad, this is bad, that is bad. For the record, I don't speak Marathi. I mean, my dad was born here, he spoke Marathi, everything, but since I was in my initial formative years, not in Mumbai, I don't speak Marathi. But I'm able to use the government of Maharashtra pretty well. I don't find a lot of my compatriots, Mauritians who are born here, good friends, being able to use the government so well. Language is not a barrier. Corrupt politicians is not a barrier. Corrupt IS officers are not a barrier. Business interests are not a barrier. I've dealt with all of them. All of us have dealt with them. I think there are ways and means of doing it. What is the problem? The problem is R. When you go out to fight, there are a lot of people to pat you on the back. We are behind you, and they remain behind. I have absolutely no complaint left. This is something I've been saying since 5-7 years. I have absolutely no complaints with the builders. In fact, I owe them a lot because I have learned a lot from them in terms of methodology, about how to keep cool, about how to manage your ego. These are not things which I've learned from my fellow activists. It's something I've learned from the opposite camp. How to be methodical, how to be perseverant, keep going on. That's how the builders behave. That's how the politicians are. That's how the bureaucrats are. That's not something I've learned from the environmental movement. That's something I learned from the opposite camp. The big enemy of the 239, 249 square kilometers, which PK pointed out, is not any of these people. The big enemy is not even the indifferent people. Forget the people who are directly causing a damage to our mangroves, to the national park, to our rivers, dumping debris on coastlines. Those people are one set of enemies. The bigger set, and then there's a big set of people who are indifferent, who care a damn. I mean, what is this discussion? Why are people wasting their evening sitting over here where they could have been doing much better? They're absolutely indifferent. I have absolutely no complaint with them. In the beginning of, and at the mid-90s and late 90s, I became thoroughly disillusioned with the environmental movement. I used to go for BNHS, WWF, a lot of these walks. We used to be out every weekend with binoculars, seeing that bird, this butterfly, this plant, and treks to different locations. And then when I wanted to start getting the same community involved in conservation, protecting the habitat, suddenly people disappeared. Everybody was clear that, boss, we want to do our weekend hike, we want to enjoy ourselves, we don't want to get into this khatpat of going to the ward officer, going to government of Maharashtra Mantralaya. Who's going to break our heads with these people? So my big complaint is that the people who call themselves naturalists, the people who call themselves committed to the environment, concerned about the environment, speak out, etc., when expected to be in action, you find very, very few of them. If today just the 10,000, 20,000 odd people who care about the environment, who read about it in the papers, etc., put forwards, post it on Facebook, etc., were to just get active, I'm 100% sure we can transform Mumbai's rivers, lakes, mangroves, forests, everything. Development is not a problem. The cities which are far dense than us, Hong Kong, New York, maybe Tokyo, etc., which are doing a fabulous job of existing perfectly sustainably as an urban existence. So, in a sense, that word R is where I'm coming to. That it ate my head completely. I said this has to be the first slide where I talk about this at length, because that is in a sense what I want to speak right now. Just one more question I want to ask over here. How many people segregate garbage at home? All of us generate garbage. Okay, couple of hands. Quite a lot more than being a part of environmental organization, volunteering. This seems to be a bigger category. And some of the next slides I want to take you through is something as simple as, I've never been, all through the 90s, etc., when I was deeply into the academic side, I used to read these heavy-duty reports and what is happening at the big UN conferences, etc. And then I said, this is exactly what is wrong. Because to the average person on the ground, you don't want to discuss this heavy stuff, policy and this and that. And somewhere it has to be broken down. And the last 10, 12 years of my life have essentially been about how do you simplify the environmental discourse? How do you make it accessible? That is something which I have learned from corporates. That's not something I've learned from the environmental lobby. You have to make your product or service absolutely accessible to the dumbest of person out there. You have to treat consumer as king. A lot of times the environmental lobby likes to treat people as rubbish. I mean, people are bad. Because of people, the environment is bad, etc. And not that I'm not completely that way. I mean, I get derogatory about the human existence and human beings and their behavior also. But you have to learn from the corporate lobby in a sense of how to have bigger market share, if I may use that word. And this whole battle is really about mind space and mind share. How do you make more people work towards the environment? So we have a lot more people, and segregation of garbage is really been one of my moot points wherever I speak. And I'll take you through some of the next slides, and then we can have one more Q&A. You can keep guessing the locations afterwards. I'll quickly go through the sites. I guess anybody can guess. What exactly is happening over here? What's that? Loudly, slightly. Garbage. Huh? Right, garbage dump. Right, I guess everybody's got that right. These are the mangroves which we've been speaking about. The water coming in, there's a wall behind. These are dead mangroves because of water being filled over there. These are some of the last remaining birds in that habitat. These are trucks, which I suppose everybody is familiar with. These trucks are visible all along the road. The logo, is there a point over here? Yeah? Yeah, okay. So this logo over here is kind of very familiar. Clean up Mumbai, I clean Mumbai. I clean Mumbai and then I dump it somewhere else. That's also within Mumbai. This is Mumbai. This is not out of Mumbai. So again, you can see fair. And you can see the mangroves behind, and there is something else behind. Quickly again, this is Google Earth imagery. Close up, one more close up. What is this location? If anybody would like to, the pictures which I was showing you, where are they from? No. Gorai is one answer. Any other guesses? Devnar? No, not Devnar. Navi Mumbai? No. Anybody else? Warsaw Malad? No. Yeah, so okay. Finally, this is Kanjur Marg. If you see, this is the eastern board of Mumbai. This is the highway. This is the LBS Marg. This is Thane Creek. This is Navi Mumbai on the other side. This site is Kanjur Marg, which is Mumbai's latest garbage dump. Just as we have the latest car models come on the streets, so this is the latest garbage dump on the street. We should go to the showroom and buy a couple of kilos of garbage over there. And this is kind of the before image. This is 2005. This is how it is looking currently. And it has been cordoned off with walls, and this is almost varies between 65 hectares to 142 hectares. The municipal corporation said they will make a scientific landfill site with composting facilities, etc., etc. But if from this kind of an audience only 25% people are segregating garbage, you can imagine the kind of garbage which is going there. 75% of it is mixed waste. This is how the waste is generated. This could be any place. This is at VT, one of the places. All this kind of garbage. Some of it is segregated and recyclers take it, but most of it is taken away. These are common sites. I mean, maybe not common in all neighborhoods. Some of the more posher neighborhoods have compactors come very rigorously. This is a site I showed in my previous office where I was working. Just close to our office was this lady who was slightly mentally unstable, and she had this kid, and with this kid she would be sorting all the garbage which used to go from our office and 30 other offices in the neighborhood. She used to sit in the garbage dump with her kid and be taking out all the stuff which we would put into a common garbage bin. And all of this goes to the latest, newest garbage point in Mumbai, Kanjur Marg. And most of it is recyclable stuff. The way she's able to feed herself and her kid is by selling all the recyclable garbage. She manages to get 20, 30, 50, whatever rupees, and out of that, and whatever her state of mind is within which she managed to, I mean, and it's hats off to her, how she manages to live like this. And this is something I got enforced in my office. I said, we cannot just be not practicing sustainability. The previous office where I was working is a big sustainable organization and deals with a lot of big global issues. But the problem in the world today is that while we love to talk these big treaties and notifications and development plan and a lot of other laws, we really need to, at the other end, break things down to very small bits and pieces of activities which all of us can do. And when million people, 2 million, 5 million people, 12 million people, all of them practice this, and nobody's expecting that everybody leaves aside their professions and whatever they're doing and become an environmentalist full-time. I mean, that would be, none of us are saying that. I think the constant appeal from the environmental community, everybody, has been that everybody needs to contribute some amount to it, as long as it's only going to be a handful. And today, if I may be factually correct, I think it's exactly 100 people in the city who might be active. progressively you'll have 1,000 more people who are supporting those active people in few ways, 10,000 more people who do something more, and beyond that there is a vast 100,000, 200,000, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million people who are kind of completely disconnected from this whole subject. And that really is the big worry, much, much more than corrupt politicians, bureaucrats, and the business lobby. So this is where I think I would like to just leave. Again, at the end, I was doing all of this, the khichdi in my mind, which you created, are, my, their, your. What do these words mean? I mean, there is a constant kind of a joke which I keep having with a lot of people. At the end of any email, you will see sincerely. A lot of times people are not sincere. But since we are such an intelligent species, we know that we can use certain words and still get away with it. So you can be as insincere in your communication, and yet if you write sincerely at the end of it, everything is perfectly okay. And the same thing goes with ours. Our city, our environment. What are you talking? I don't think it's ours. That R is limited to 100 odd people who are working for it tirelessly day in, day out through huge amount of threat. The environment is not certainly of those people. The city is certainly not of those people who are not participating in it. It is the SUVs, it is the perfumes, it is the designer labels, etc., which is theirs. So ours is only limited to few, my, their, our, yours. And so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Well, this sets us up nicely for a discussion. And since many of the presentations have concentrated on land use, you know, the conventional wisdom is that we're a peninsular city, we're growing quickly, we have no option but to build as prolifically as possible. And so I'd like to get to something you spoke about, Debbie, about the CRZ. Is the coastal regulation zone, which limits construction within a certain distance from the to high tide line, actually is it a practical thing in our city, or should we rethink what to do about this? If I can throw it open to all of you all.
Okay, I'll answer it with another question, Naresh, if I may. Have you heard of climate change and sea level rise and tsunamis and whatever? If you look at a map of Mumbai 400 years ago, the so-called island city was actually 7 small islands, which have been reclaimed over the past 300 years and made into what we today call the island city. That's from Kolaba up to Mahim, and Mahim Bandra axis and up to Sion. So that has been created through a process of reclamation by the British mainly, most of it. And there was a bit done post-independence, Nariman Point and so on. Now, my personal belief is that maybe another 30 years down the line, we'll be back to 7 big islands and several hundreds of skyscrapers, which will be much smaller islands, dotting the landscape and seascape of Mumbai. And I said this at a builders conference, I think 15 years ago, when the whole emphasis was to try and get the CRZ notification scrapped by the MOEF and diluted. And I said, what you consider prime real estate today, a house on the beach, is actually going to be a very, very bad investment with sea level rise and climate change. And if you think that man-made PWD structures are going to protect the city from sea erosion and climate change, God help you.
PK, is there another reason in addition to climate change to keep the CRZ?
No, I think we need to get our facts right. The background to CRZ, how it came about first. It was Mrs. Indira Gandhi who introduced the concept of CRZ in this country. And there was only a single preamble or an objective for it. And that is to check the densification of the coastline. That was really one of the primary objectives of the introduction of CRZ by Mrs. Indira Gandhi. Now, what that really means is that if you densify too much along the coast or close to the water lines or high tide lines, then there is the vulnerability of extensive pollution. That was really the thrust. Now, the point is, there are many, many issues involved with it. because the CRZ issues have been debated over the past several years. It has matured in many ways. It has become absurd in many ways. It has become meaningful in many ways. Now we are generalizing it too quickly and too briefly. Now what happens is, there is a difference between a CRZ line and where you can construct and where you cannot construct. Where you can construct and you cannot construct can be based on the environmental or the geographic or the ecological condition at that point or place or water's edge. For example, if there's a mangrove, obviously we oppose any construction. Or if there's any wetlands, we oppose construction. Like today, the government of Maharashtra is insisting in acquiring salt pane lands for construction under the guise of affordable housing. We even then oppose that. But to draw a uniform line in a city like Mumbai is too simplistic, is my point. And this needs to be relooked and rejudged from the point of view of densification, which was its original objective.
Great, thanks. Rishi, I wanted to ask you about the other method that people suggest for increasing the city's land area, which is reclamation. And some of it is also related to dumping on mangroves, which is essentially reclamation. What are your thoughts on reclamation? So far, reclamation in this city, we've had a terrible history with it, mainly because every reclamation scheme since the 1850s has turned out to be hopelessly corrupt. But in terms of the environment, cities like Hong Kong, for instance, reclaim regularly. Where do you stand on this?
Again, I will support what Debbie had said earlier. I mean, climate change really is no longer something which is academic. And a lot of people have been, the current US campaign has turned out to be so interesting because of the deep divide over climate change. But it really is happening. I mean, if you look at the last reports in the past 2 months, the Arctic is melting at a far rapid rate than previously calculated. In the next 20 years, people are saying we will have a situation where the Arctic will be completely ice-free during the summers. There'll be ships plying through the North Pole, routes will be shortened, new minerals, everybody's setting up shop over there. That water has to go somewhere. I mean, it cannot all evaporate and land somewhere on Mars. So the idea is that sea levels are potentially going to rise. And if they're going to rise, then no amount of PWD structures and barricades, etc., is going to save you. The flip side of reclamation is that the argument is constantly made that we are a land scarce city and we need land for commerce, we need land for housing, and unless that doesn't happen, a certain GDP will not be met. While coming to this function, Rajiv and I walked up the building, and while we were walking up, the whole discussion was how almost 50% or 70% of this building is lying empty. It's lying empty, no use happening at all. As huge slabs as Studio-X are lying completely empty. Nobody's doing any activity over there. It's pitch dark right now while there's light over here. Which is basically your housing, your land use policy. There is more than enough land in the already existing land reclaimed in Mumbai. You just don't need more land at all. This is complete hoax which is being thrust upon the city. And that's where I keep saying that the environmental discourse, in that sense, the discourse about your city, the quantity and quality is so poor. The capacity of people to appreciate the interlinkages between different topics. Right now we are talking environment, but we could very well be talking housing, which is a subject on which PK is really the master on. I mean, just as the CRZ line is simplistic, our whole notions about FSI are even more simplistic, I think. I agree that the CRZ line is extremely simplistic. I don't want to go on this topic more, but the final thing I want to tell you is that this is something I've been telling for the past 10 years. The CRZ Act has done less good for the environment and it has done more good for the bank accounts of corrupt officials, politicians and activists. You have RTI activists, you have environmental activists who've benefited from the CRZ line more than the environment. People have been filing RT. I mean, you go to any of the coasts, go to Breach Candy. I've been giving that example to the journalist of late. Go to Gautam Singhania's new building. It's coming up 20, 30 stories. He's making another Antilla over there. If you look in that whole range, 150 meters from the high tide line, you're having these huge structures come up. And then I'll take you through examples in Andheri, where you have one road, you have two road. and yet properties are in dispute. Why? Because somebody slapped CRZ on them. And I'm saying, where the hell does CRZ come over here? It's just because if you don't pay up, then we'll stop your construction on some grounds. I don't want to expand on this right now, but CRZ has really been abundantly misused. The whole concept has been abundantly misused, and this is bound to happen in a city where it's only 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 people on whom the knowledge is embodied. The rest of the city is essentially dumb. People don't read the notifications. People don't read other laws on housing, on FSI. People don't follow what exactly happens in Hong Kong or Singapore. It's great to talk about Singapore, Shanghai, Hong Kong, New York, London. But it is so much more fascinating to actually go through their past 50 years, 100 years, the kind of legislations, politics, the corruption, huge amount of corruption in Hong Kong. The last reclamation they carried out was in 97, the Kowloon Bay Harbour reclamation, and huge amount of corruption. It was just 2 or 3 politicians and business interests which reclaimed 700 odd acres, and after that they've frozen the reclamation. So we really need to get into, I mean, again, the discourse is very simplistic. Unless you don't enrich it more, there is bound to be all kind of wrong decisions being taken.
Sure. And also I want to draw you into this. Both of you all were involved in the debate about the Borivali National Park. And I want to ask you what lessons the city has learned from this, which fundamentally sort of brought together this sort of debate between man versus nature. So, Debbie, I know you want to talk about the CRZ, and then if we can talk about that.
No, I just want to make a statement about facts, since this issue was raised by PK. Indira Gandhi wrote a letter in 1981 to the chief ministers of all the coastal states, basically saying that all the beaches should be kept free of unwanted development. And that letter was actually replied to by all the chief ministers of all the Congress-ruled states, saying that yes, ma'am, it's a very good idea. And I think a couple of chief ministers wrote back to her, saying that 500 meters is not good enough, it should be 1 kilometer. But of course, after she was killed in 84, everybody forgot about it. We started working on the CRZ notification sometime in 88, and the first draft notification came out in November 90. It was allowed to lapse. November 89, that was allowed to lapse. The second draft notification was issued in November 90, and the CRZ notification came into force in February 91. And Indira Gandhi's letter was a 1-paragraph letter. The first CRZ notification ran into 6 pages of very single-space typing, and there was quite a bit of thought that went into it from the Ministry of Environment at that point of time, given the circumstances that surrounded it. And the second point is the CRZ line is not a uniform line. There are categories of CRZ, 1, 2, and 3, and what can be allowed within 1, 2, and 3 is also quite different. And one of the things that most people seem to forget is the CRZ notification itself required all the coastal states to prepare a proper land use map based on the CRZ, which actually nobody did. And that created a situation where the Supreme Court had to intervene and say that nothing will happen until this whole mess is sorted out. So the problem is actually being created by the state governments who refused to prepare a coastal zone management plan when they had the opportunity to do so. And I've had very heated interactions with bureaucrats, mainly driven by politicians who have been egged on by builders, who wanted to change the CRZ line and said, this can't be done in a city like Mumbai. We need the land, we need more buildings, we need, and I don't use the word development anymore. I say development, DEVILOPMENT. It helps me saying, using inverted commas, because that is really what is causing the problem. Nobody is opposed to development, but the question is what is actually development, which we don't want to get into right now.
Debbie, if you could tell us what you've learned from the Borivali National Park case.
Well, one thing very clearly has come across, that there are honest bureaucrats, there are honest forest officers, and there are also very few honest politicians. At least honest when certain things are concerned, maybe not whatever. But they seem to be overwhelmed by their counterparts who are not so honest. And actually what triggered off my petition in the High Court is a very simple incident. I don't know how many of you have been to the national park, but there are these 2,000-year-old rock-cut caves, the Canary Caves. And above the Canary Caves, there is a place what is known as Gaumukh in the national park. And one Baba, one of these so-called religious guys, had set up an ashram over there. 3-storied ashram using granite and marble and whatever. And there was a natural stream which he had diverted, so instead of going to wildlife and down to the caves, he was using it for his own personal use and so on and so forth. And had built a pipeline into his ashram through forest land. The forest officer at that point of time demolished that pipeline. And within 3 hours, he got a phone call from the Minister of Forests saying that he was told that you reinstall that pipeline at your own cost by the end of the day, or you're going to be sacked. Now, this was the state of affairs prevailing inside a national park in the heart of a city like Mumbai, where legally entry inside the park requires you to buy a pass to go in. And when we talk about people living along the periphery, I'm not talking about the tribals. These were people who have come in from other parts of Maharashtra and other parts of the country. And they were just using the space in the national park as a place to squat and a place where, there were slumlords selling pieces of land in the national park on stamp paper, saying that this is our land, we can sell it to you for 15,000 rupees, 25,000 rupees. You can build your house there and nobody is going to touch you. And if you just look at do some basic mathematics, the amount of hafta
or working, we as groups of people, as communities, begin to interact collectively on some of these very critical issues concerning our city and its environment. And that has many other positive effects. It's not just about fighting about something. It's also about learning about governance. It's learning about the whole science of politics, which is essentially about a democratic, learnings about democratic functioning and forums, which is something not a prescribed form, how democracy works. Democracy is something that evolves through these collective endeavors. And that's why I keep saying that cities are essentially about collective endeavors and how these campaigns could become a part of that purpose or objective. So we need to individually, collectively, whether we are learned or not fully learned about a specific issue to do with pollution or land use or planning, we still, when we come together collectively, we learn. There are public dialogues that help. In fact, public dialogues are an essential aspect of democracy. And such dialogues, not just in conference rooms, but dialogues in the community areas of the neighborhoods, on the streets, in community halls, or wherever, in different forums and platforms, are absolutely necessary. And there are purposeful, engineered methods by the government that sort of dissuades you from conducting these dialogues. That how public can feel, how every individual can feel self-sufficient. And that's a part of the market economy drive, more so under neoliberalism. And so we have to do this in a very conscious and planned way.
No, I'll just add to the social media in short. Absolutely, I think the point is taken. In fact, during my thing, that's what I was talking a lot, that we have a lot to learn from the opposite side. The mainstream corporate, the market economy, in terms of increasing your market share. And I mean, if I have to just answer for myself personally, I am maybe not tweeting to the extent I should, but yes, certainly, I mean, I have a presence, and I think it is very effective because you really end up, even in 140 characters, being able to engage a lot with people at times. So it's good fun to do this 140 character conversation at times, back and forth, back and forth. And just to come to the question since Laila was saying about the MMRD meeting, I was there myself and I engaged the Metropolitan Commissioner, Mr. Rahul Astana, significantly. And the point which I wanted to make was that they have made an inventory of 3,493 environmental features of Mumbai. Huge chunk of those features have water as the constant element in them. And essentially wetlands, lakes, rivers, ponds, creeks, estuaries, sea, beaches. And the point which I had to Mr. Asthana was that what you're doing in a sense is just introducing one more law in a land which is overflowing with law but no justice. We've no shortage of legislations. I mean, if as the Metropolitan Commissioner, your purpose of mapping environmental features is that you want to safeguard them and make them available, even 10 years back, even 20 years back, you had sufficient means to ensure that at least the water quality was good. You have the Water Conservation, Prevention of Water Pollution Act, Environmental Protection Act, even your BMC guidelines, you can cancel licenses of polluting units. There are hazard things you can do. But, I mean, in a way, you're misleading people with all this. You're trying to show, yes, we are doing a great work, and in a sense, it is that sincerely which I was talking about. You write one big mail, which is absolutely hogwash, and then at the end, you write sincerely, and everything is okay. And that's what my invitation to him was, that just take up one river, Mithi, 17 kilometers of Mithi, transform the water quality in it, and then we will talk about all these big exercises of mapping, etc. The 2005 floods became an excellent opportunity for corrupt contractors, politicians, bureaucrats to get together and pour concrete along the embankments, and that was treated as something that is a great job we are doing for Mithi. No, it was for their own personal pockets. That was a great job. We spent 700 crores of public money. There's no audit. And I'm inviting him to do a public audit of the money spent and what is the advantage we've got. So, yes, it's good. I'm a great fan of inventories and data and analysis, but let's have the perspective of what really is required. You need to clean up the water quality. You need to punish polluting units. You need to have technology implemented. Those are the things which we need.
Sir, 50% of the population of this city live in slums, and they occupy 6% of the city land. It is naturally, what can be done about that? 50% of the population numbering 60 lakhs, and they are occupying land to the tune of 6% of the city. What can be done about that?
Well, it's a very difficult question to answer in 2 minutes, but
almost nothing can be done according to
no. No, 2 minutes is not going to be able to answer the thing, but the point is a lot can be done. There is scope for providing affordable and sustainable housing for these people within the city, but that can only be done if you keep the builders out of the equation. You can't, the existing SRA scheme, which is builder driven, is not providing decent housing to begin with. In fact, you're converting horizontal slums into vertical slums through the SRA scheme. But there is a tremendous opportunity and there's a tremendous need to do this. But the SRA thing is actually taking us into reverse gear. We can discuss this separately. I don't think we have time now for a detailed discussion.
Again, the point about politicians, my dad was born in Kalbadevi, and if any one of us have been, and all of us must have been, look at the tattered state of Seaward, the cessed buildings. Any of the lanes you walk through, sewage is the only thing you smell. I mean, any of the buildings, you never know when a whole thing will fall on your head. Everything is on stilts. In 2008, I was working for 8 months on a short project called Remaking of Mumbai Federation, which wanted to do a cluster-based redevelopment of 200 acres. And for me, it was more sentimental than a job or environment or anything. My dad was born close by. Look at the Rent Act. The Rent Act has criminally, over the past 40, 50 years, destroyed this part of the city completely, because it allows tenants to stay in properties and pay their landlord something like 200, 500 rupees. Nobody's had an incentive to take care of the housing stock or bring in new stock. Buildings like these, why are 50, 70% empty? All of that can be used for commercial. And similarly, if you do an audit of this area, huge amount of empty space you'll find. Where is the shortage? That's why I said you don't need to reclaim land. I'll just rest it there, but the fact is that these are the kind of, and where do the people come in? Again, not necessarily the politicians. The tenants who stay in the whole Kalbadevi area formed a huge vote bank for Mr. Murli Devra, his son, even before everybody, that if you don't repeal the Rent Act, we will keep voting for you. In a sense, they were doing something criminal, and they awarded politicians if they allowed their criminal activity to be done. So legislation need not necessarily be the best thing about countries. Legislations can also be criminal. The current Rent Act is completely criminal. I mean, if you were to able to do a complete cluster-based redevelopment over here, you would have massive housing stock coming up in a nice planned new urban neighborhoods with sewage taken care of, garbage taken care of, walkable neighborhoods, cyclable neighborhoods. People could stay in Kalba Devi and work at Nariman Point. That kind of a situation is possible. I mean, but today people are staying in Nariman Point, in Malad, Kandivali. Families who migrated from here because their dwelling units became small and they couldn't grow, and they shifted to Malad and Kandivali, and then they were coming back to work over here. So these are the kind of warped policies which are again playing out.
Thanks. You had a question?
I think you know about the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Mission. So it is the actually mission about who don't have a own house. For those people staying since 15 to 20 years. So they are getting a low cost subsidized rates. So what is the status of, because I have applied actually so 2-3 years, there is no status still now. So there is opportunity for everyone. So I don't know about what is doing actually.
I was just wondering if each one of you could maybe name your top 3 actions you think everyone could take now from leaving here to kind of start to reconnect with the environment. So whether it's a book you recommend reading, whether it's sorting waste, what for each of you would be the top 3 things you'd want everyone here to walk away from?
So my question is for Mr. Das, Architect Das. Sir, as a city, till now what we've seen that arbitrary relaxation of norms have been very apparent, especially if we see the Ambani building, that's just one of it. And how far do you think, like Mr. Goenka said, that he foresees the city as lots of islands, lots of pockets of islands around the city. So how far do you think that, it's personally, for my thesis, I would like to inquire that how far would the CRZ be able to hold back the encroachment into the sea? How far do we think like that? Would this situation prevail?
The CRZ issue has been adequately discussed, but what's very interesting about Mumbai is that it's one of those very rare cities which expands and grows without planning. This is one city that just sort of grows and develops without, it's not about absence of planning, it's about no planning. And we have been operating only through the DCR route, because that's the only route in which the politicians can tinker and change and introduce new schemes or withdraw or amend schemes. So therefore the developments in Mumbai has been anarchic. Whether it's the SRD scheme, whether it's the CES buildings reconstruction, or it's 33-7, 33-9 as it's called, or it's cluster redevelopment, these are highly anarchic developments. You therefore see high-rise buildings now 10 feet apart. In most of the slums rehabilitation schemes, including what MMRDA has built, there are no open spaces, no amenities, no conveniences, and buildings are 10 feet apart. 15-story buildings 10 feet apart. So we are further slumifying this city. As I think you mentioned that, we are further slumifying the city from slums to worse living conditions than in slums. So the only way to fight this, therefore, positively speaking, is to try and enforce planning in this city. And how do we bring in planning? How can we demand planning through different schemes that have already been announced? How can these schemes which have been announced in a particular way be amended to dovetail them into a planning idea? Now we've done that. It is happening. There are positive steps in that direction. There are groups which are working on cluster redevelopment ideas, dovetailing the 33-7, 33-9 projects to that Mumbai can no more be developed through these individual schemes through the DCR route by addressing a plot for an individual development. But we need to see an entire area at a planning level, as a planning unit, and how individual plots then can be dovetailed to a planning unit. And in the planning unit, you set out the parameters for social amenities, open spaces, roads, infrastructure, etc. Now, based on the same idea, we have worked extensively on the slums redevelopment and affordable housing question. It's true, as Rishi said, there is absolutely no shortage of land in this city. In fact, we have more land than what we really need if we have a planned redevelopment. And in the instance of slums redevelopment and affordable housing, we have showed to the Chief Minister in a presentation just 2 days back, and he's now set up a committee to take this idea forward, that we've showed through a town planning exercise on slums occupied land that you don't need densities more than 500 tenements per hectare, which otherwise is reaching to 1,250 tenements per hectare under the present SRD schemes. You don't need buildings to be more than ground and 6 stories upper, which otherwise today is reaching to 25-floor buildings for slum dwellers. You don't need to look for additional land for social amenities, which is causing underdevelopment of people in this city by way of their access to healthcare and education. But you can actually build that alongside with housing if housing is not commodified as a product in the market and its reproduction and numbers becoming the basis of a housing scheme and so on and so forth. So there are positive steps possible. We can achieve that provided there is a unified and collective movement towards these demands.
Thanks. Devi, if you could address that question about the 3 things we can do to make the environment better.
Well, I think the first thing is, perhaps the most important thing, is to try and make people realize that it is their environment, and unless they contribute or become part of the environmental protection and improvement thing, it's not going to happen. I think that's the only thing I can think of that is really, really important.
Rishi, do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I think 3 things. First really is what I showed in my slides also, waste. Please become intensely aware. Start falling in love with your waste. Before throwing it in the dustbin, stare at it like lovingly and have a look at it and see what you're doing. Please become aware. Each and every piece of waste that you generate. Is it a paper, metals? Please start segregating. I think that's clearly my first thing. And not just the environmental, the human. I mean, look at the kind of conditions in which people lift up your garbage. It's a question of human dignity. So segregate garbage as much as possible. If you can compost at home, excellent. Try to work with your building. Try to make it waste-free, your offices, whatever. Second thing is, since we've been doing the walking project, if you can do an audit just of your neighborhood, don't do it for any other neighborhood, nothing. Just start getting involved. Maybe we can speak about it later, etc. We've set up a website, walkingproject.org. You can just register. But if you can just do an audit, make your neighborhood streets walking friendly, clean, pleasure to be on the street, that's great. And the third thing would be start becoming aware. Like I said, the quality of environmental discourse is poor because people are not reading enough. Need to start, maybe, and Twitter is such a fantastic way where you can subscribe to feeds from so many different organizations. You might not do any original work yourself, but can enrich yourself so much from the work of people. I mean, it could be national, local, international. So these are the 3 kind of things I think would be good.
Thanks. You know, that film that I showed in the beginning, Tum Mile, doesn't actually have a happy ending. And I was expecting our discussion today to be much more despondent. But I'm completely delighted that actually everybody's here is quite upbeat. PK has discovered that we have 260 square kilometers of open space. Rishi says that if we all get involved, we can actually change things. And this is all possible, as Devi pointed out, through getting involved, through socio-environment movements, through reclaiming the city as ours. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you next month, I hope, October the 10th, where we talk about literature in our city. PK, thank you. Devi and Rishi.